Filtered truth about the journey to self-actualization and the path to heart-centered leadership. You'll hear raw lessons, learn ancient wisdom, and practical steps to rise to your fullest potential. Now is the time to walk into this new paradigm of leadership. Let's transcend together. We have two very special guests, and we have Keri Ford and Jake Kaufman, who are transformational coaches and spiritual mentors specializing in women's and men's work. Collectively, they help others redefine success to experience a greater sense of fulfillment, happiness, love, both in their business and in their life. Jake has published his first book, Let Love In, which we just recorded a podcast on. So definitely want to go check out that podcast. It's a memoir, which I'm diving in right now, and it's an incredible book, very well written. And their work can be best described as a multidisciplinary integration of business strategy and holistic healing practices. So welcome back, both of you, because I had you on the podcast, Keri.
About a year and a half ago?
Was it that long ago?
Yeah, it's been a minute, yeah.
Wow.
Maybe a year, but I think it was longer. Yeah.
So much.
In like the time vortex.
Yeah, truly. I feel like time is going by so fast.
Yeah.
We did a really great episode on somatics. I can't remember what the exact episode is, but my team will link it in the show notes. So definitely going to want to go circle back to that. And we just recorded your podcast and your book. So fabulous. So it's really special to have you two here. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah. And I get to spend a couple more days with you guys in person. We're
Super
in Vegas
pumped.
right now.
Yeah.
Oh, what a time to be alive. Yeah. And I want to start off with something that I hadn't told you guys. And it was how I actually came into your world. And it was, I think there was a post that one or both of you made around how you all came back together after a breakup. I think there was like a couch in the photo that you guys were sitting on. Somehow, some way. Shoot. What was that?
That was our Orlando photo shoot.
Yeah. Somehow, some way that landed on my feed, and I read how vulnerably you two shared about your journey and what you were navigating and your split, and then the reconnection, and it was just a very powerful read. Just very direct, but also very heartfelt. And so I wanted to actually kind of start there. Sure. If you all are open. And Keri, I'd like to start with you. Can you give us a little backstory on your relationship and really highlighting the moment of separation and then coming back together as well?
So many moving parts. That it's interesting because we call it 1.0, the first container.
You call it 1.0.
We both call it 1.0.
He disagrees.
Yeah, that first container was really raw because we had done so much work on ourselves individually. And I remember having, and I shared this with you at the pool the other day, I remember having this moment where I thought, okay, I'm ready for a partnership, for a relationship. I feel the road is complete in terms of what I can do on my own. I have found my peace within myself and enter a relationship where someone basically comes in and, beep, bop, boop, pushes all your buttons and triggers all of your deepest, darkest fears, wants to see your shadow come out, wants to fully see you, which is kind of a mind fuck.
Yeah.
And so we could not sustain that container in the way that we had entered it. And we both had some individual healing that we needed to look in the mirror and come to terms with. For me, I'll speak about my process. It was still operating from the space of anxiety and trying to force timelines to ensure some sort of stability and safety when it had nothing to do with that at all. And it was learning how to find in myself the safety and security I was seeking at outside of myself that I made him responsible for. And that only pushes him away, and it really dramatically affects the polarity in the relationship. So for me, it was that. And then the other part of that was understanding, how do I define love? Truly from a belief, like if I could isolate the actual belief, because we want love, we desire love, and and when we have it, sometimes a very pure form of it, it triggers the fuck out of us because we're not really ready for it in terms of the beliefs and the beliefs that we have about it unconsciously. And so for me, that was, I realized that I had defined love as I need you to need me, which, as you can imagine,
Incredibly codependent.
Just speaking true.
Let's just
I've
call
been
a spade
there.
a spade.
I've totally been there too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
but you're unconsciously driving and you can't find where your foot's on the gas pedal. So your
Yeah.
actions and behaviors are operating from this space, and you're like, I don't understand. Like, seems like it's a good fit. All of these things match up in terms of partnership and alignment. Like, we had so many things that we had felt very much in sync on, and yet I can't seem to fully let love in, right? I can't seem to fully actually receive it because I was equally as emotionally unavailable, and I'll let you share your part. And that was only playing more into the push-pull dynamic or attachment style, me being historically dominant and anxious attachment. So yeah, it was two-part for me.
Well, and I think it's important to bring some more context, some greater context into the equation. You had been married for 10 years, had 2 kids. I had never been married, no kids. And so I didn't have this language for this at the time, but in many ways, the forcing of timelines that you mentioned, that you acknowledged, was very much too soon, too fast for me.
Are you saying it traumatized you?
I mean, a little bit. But I was very keenly aware of how that made me feel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it made me feel overwhelmed. It made me feel dysregulated because it was so much transition, so much new, too much transition in a way that 100% had me want to run away naturally, instinctually. In an attempt to return to safety, and so obviously I was in the same boat as you, where I was playing out this very historical avoidant attachment in relationship, but in many ways it kind of needed to happen.
Oh, it totally needed to happen. I needed to fully let it go, like the attachment that love has to exist outside of me, and that you are responsible for my sourcing of safety and stability. Because as long as I was operating from that, you were forever going to want to run away, understandably.
Well, and I would fundamentally never be good enough.
Yeah, it's true.
Because whenever I would make a mistake or fail to live up to your expectations, I would never feel good enough from the context of that space.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you for sharing so vulnerably on the show. And with that, I'm curious too, did the separation was it the catalyst, or what happened from that place? You did the healing work, but was the relationship ending, or at that moment feel like an ending, actually spark something for you to want to move into for yourself?
Just more healing for me.
Yeah.
I've had, when things like that happen, I have this hunger for healing.
Yeah.
Not to figure it out and to get through the painful part, but to truly understand what it is in me that attracts that, and understanding and knowing there's a mirror for everything.
Yeah.
Every choice, every reflection is a mirror within myself. And so from understanding that, I was like, what is it in me that is noticing a pattern? It obviously was not exclusive to him. This has been, it caused me, I literally remember doing an audit of every relationship I had ever had.
Wow.
In my journal after our rupture, because I was like, where was I in each of these? What attachment style was I in? And what I came to find was that every time a man was actually interested in me, I'd be like, yeah, what's up with that? Why is he so into me? And I was like, oh my God, I'm unavailable.
Right. Anxious, avoidant.
Yes. So every time, I'm either chasing or running. So it's actually normal in my nervous system, or soothing on some level, to pursue unavailable love. And so I was recreating these patterns. And when I saw that, I'm like, all right, anxious, ooh, avoidant. And then I went back and I'm like, how was he, the man in the dynamic? He was really into me. Oh, wow. Suddenly I mistook that as like a lack of chemistry.
Interesting.
So
Yeah.
what happens in a trauma bond is it confirms our trauma, our stories. And so I was continually experiencing a lot of the same kind of dynamics over and over again to kind of play out this self-fulfilling prophecy unconsciously.
Yeah, so you didn't do the healing work to fix it.
Nope.
You were like, okay, I realize that I'm contributing to what's happening here, and I want to understand so that my life can play out differently.
Yeah, I'll never have what it is I say I want unless I close the gap on where this is unconsciously playing out. Because I can cognitively say that I want love, and yet I'm experiencing the same like lack of love. That was my experience of it, right? And
What do
so
my
I'm
results say?
Yeah, like what do my results say I believe about myself? Oh, fuck.
What do my results say that I believe about love? And so, like Keri mentioned, consciously, we all want the same thing. We all verbalize the same desire when it comes to romantic love or connection or intimacy, but our unconscious is actually reality. And so by analyzing our results, we're actually able to determine what are the beliefs that are ultimately driving my behavior. And so both of us did some self-reflection. Like Keri mentioned, both of us, personal development work had in many ways been a lifestyle for the two of us, separately of one another before we even knew each other. So the breakup was just this invitation to go deeper into work that we had already been doing prior to ever meeting. And that's where we had to take a really honest look at the role we play in our own suffering. In this case, the role that we play in pushing away love or in being incapable of receiving love and therefore giving love in return.
Even though it's what we say we want.
Yeah.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I've heard this on Aubrey Marcus's podcast, and I might butcher this, but it's like the thing that you want the most is also the thing you're most afraid of.
I think there's a lot of truth to that.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of truth to that in many ways. If you think about it as a calling that all of us are called to love, it's a curse. It's the thing that you can't not do, or the thing that you can't not pursue. So you're either forced to reconcile it or you're bound to repeat it.
And that's what we realized it didn't really matter who was on the other end of the relationship, that we would arrive there within ourselves anyway.
Yeah, can you say more about that?
Yeah. So if what I'm saying if I'm saying I want the most divine love, and yet I am consistently recreating this trauma bond essentially, or I'm operating from this anxious attachment, I'm not in creation of what it is I say I want. I've got to arrive there within myself if I want to attract that on the outside. And I would get there whether it was with Jake or another partner at that level of intimacy.
Yeah.
So it was about Jake and it wasn't about Jake.
Yeah.
And for me, it was incredibly repelling, as you can imagine. Yes, my own avoidant tendencies absolutely played a part and played a role. But, when you have someone that's chasing you, it can become incredibly suffocating. And so for me, distancing myself from that was almost in a sense a way that I chose myself, even though it was absolutely my trauma coming to the surface, because I felt suffocated. But really what was going on, at least that was my perception and therefore my experience. But what was really going on was Keri was like, this is how much I love you. This is how much I want to be with you. But I wasn't able to experience that because of the trauma that I had been through and the fallout from that trauma, right? The attachment style that created, the wounding, the inherent wounding that it created that I was just playing out in that partnership. It wasn't until I recognized that for what it really was, not what I received it as or perceived it as, was I actually able to feel it,
Yeah.
which was this immense amount of love, because I'm like, oh my gosh, this woman was just pursuing me because she wants to be with me that much.
Yeah. Yeah. In some ways, what you're saying is that, yes, there was a chasing, but there was also like a beautiful offering of herself. And you weren't really able to distinguish what was what because you had to really come to terms with like your own trauma around love.
I think I was able to, because even though I may not have had language for it at the time, what I would say now is that I was keenly aware that it was coming from a wounded place.
Yeah.
And rather than leaning in and stepping into and having a conversation about like, where is this actually coming from? What's driving this behavior? What's behind it? I just ran from it, right?
Yeah.
So it kind of activated my own, self-protective strategies within me. But on some level, I did know fundamentally that it was coming from this wounded place of trying to force timelines of chasing and pushing. So I did know that. It wasn't until I worked through this avoidant part of within myself that I was able to see her intention. That was her intention, of course, but it wasn't. I was incapable of receiving it that way, not just because it was coming from this wounded place, but I was also receiving it from a wounded place.
Yeah. Which creates like a really entangled experience where
totally.
it's like, what is what? How do you discern, like where's the thread? Like, where do you actually pull from that unravels this whole thing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think these things just have a way of working themselves out in the end. If you're consistent in doing this work, which both of us were prior to having met each other. So of course, after we broke up, we just
continued doing what
right.
we always do.
We continued.
This is our lifestyle.
Right. We continued on in the practice, and it started to work itself out where Keri was like, oh my goodness, I was absolutely coming from this wounded place and trying to force timelines and push things onto him that he wasn't ready for. And for me, it was like, oh my gosh, this woman was just trying to love me and try to show how much she wanted to be with me, but I wasn't able to receive that. And so in doing that deeper introspective work, because like Keri mentioned, how her definition of love, not what she consciously says it is, but what she unconsciously believes it is I need you to need me. Well, for me, that is that love is control.
Yeah.
Because that's the message that I received growing up.
Yeah.
That was my experience very, very intimately. And so I experienced Keri's
bids for love,
I would say. Right, as an attempt to control me, which of course felt incredibly confining. Nobody wants to be controlled. It feels very restrictive. And so naturally you want to move away from that or distance yourself from that. And so in working these things out within ourselves individually, it just naturally worked itself out, and it came back together organically.
Yeah, it reminds me as you're talking, like, to go back to the thread, it's like the necklace that is like, you might resonate more than you do, but how a necklace is all bunched up, and you don't have to necessarily find the clasp or where the actual thing is. You just kind of like loosen it up, and then you can naturally find that. And there was something that you mentioned, the bid for love. We were talking at the pool the other day about how everything's coming from either a bid for love or an expression of love. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. A Course in Miracles says there's only two truths. It's that there's either a bid for love or an expression of love. And an expression of love is pretty easy to identify. But a bid for love is not so easy. And that's where we often experience miscommunications in relationships, where someone has an unmet need, whether it's present or historical, let's just say, right? Like it could be from a wounded place from a very young part of you, or it could be present to that moment, where let's say I'm frustrated and, I'm sighing at the sink and fine, I'll do the dishes. That's really an invitation where for me to speak up and ask for support, where I'm maybe not communicating that need, but also potentially for him to identify what I'm really saying if he's listening between the lines. Oh, this is a bid for love. This is an opportunity for me to love her, with acts of service, for example. So we miss those because we make it about the dishes or we make it about all the other things that it seems like it's about. And so many times it's pretty rare actually that we get in a full-on fight, because we can nip things in the butt and hear what the other one's saying without necessarily having to communicate, because we listen to what the body's saying. We know now how to discern between those bids and those expressions of love, which I don't think we were so keen on or tapped into in the first container. But
well, we're also much more rapidly able to self-diagnose the truth, like the truth in this statement. What's mine? What's not mine? Right?
This is how we fight. We don't really.
And so we're
this is our fight
it's really
filter.
kind of funny when a disagreement happens, because
this is how
there's so much analytical work going on in the background around like, okay, what is mine to own in this scenario, in this situation, and like what is not mine, like what are they projecting onto me in this moment? And I'm gonna like kind of filter through. I'm gonna run it through this filtration system right now to say, okay, I own that and I fully accept that, and I will happily take responsibility for whatever that is. But that feels like yours. I don't feel like that's mine to own. And I feel like that's on you in the nicest, most loving way, of course. But it's really kind of funny and kind of cute when we do argue, because that's kind of what
we just start laughing.
Right? We just end up starting to laugh because we both get to this point where we are able to recognize and acknowledge, okay, this is mine, and the tension just dissolves.
It's gone. Yeah.
It just dissolves itself, because we've both stepped into a place of taking responsibility collectively, and at the same, that's when reconciliation can occur around a particular situation. And I don't think most people do that. They're operating from a wounded place, which means naturally and inherently to play the victim role in an effort to prove or protect something. And there's very little resolve there, because you can't resolve something from that space.
We do not operate in that way. There is radical responsibility, but not so much that either one of us is going to take on the other stuff,
which is
and we will
really important.
Verbalize and say, I reject that.
I like that.
But we don't experience each other as rejecting each other, because we know what we're talking about. But it's like, let me chew on that for a minute. Let me metabolize that in my body. I'm going to run it through. There's some sticky parts. This part feels, I see that. Yep, that feels like it's mine. But I reject the other part. That's not mine. That's your shit.
Like there's some validity
and we
to
say
that statement, you know.
We say that to each other. It helps to run it through our filter and kind of compartmentalize and process
sift through what's true.
Yeah.
I was thinking about when you all were talking about that some of the reason why I think couples get, have a difficult time navigating this is some of what you're saying. And also like the communication becomes inherently violent around what they're talking about. Sure. And so, learning the nonviolent communication framework has really helped me personally navigate some of these where like, here are my needs, here are my requests, etc. And taking that radical responsibility. But it's also important to kind of, recognize that not all of it is yours. And there is a fine-tuning process of like, okay, here's mine, here's yours. And then once you sort through, it's so much easier to see the whole picture of kind of what's happening.
We can just be with the truth. We don't have to, our wounds are not playing off of each other.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and in conscious relationship, you can actually let go of the historical adaptive strategies that you have taken on in an attempt to get your needs met. Because now
actually don't work.
Right, because now you have a partner, who's willing to co-create with you and support you in getting your needs met.
Yeah.
So, for example, you no longer need to assert yourself in the ways that in which you used to. Like, you no longer need to get upset, for example, when your needs aren't being met. I'm not saying that's never going to happen, because of course we're human, but it happens significantly less the more you do this work, especially within the context of partnership, conscious partnership, because now you have someone that is willing and capable of owning what's theirs, and what's not theirs, they're willing to meet you there and support you through that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's really powerful, which kind of leads me to something I want to talk about, is How do you, like, what does it actually look like for both of your processes, your practices to maintain and keep your individuation and your individual self, as well as do you have practices and things that you do together beyond like, navigating arguments? Is there intentional proactive space that's created for deepening?
We have a really natural dance at home where because we cohabitate and we also work from home, we just settle in to our routines. He is much more wants his time in the morning, and I'm also fine not talking, and he's meditating and going through his routine. And so we kind of it's like parallel play with children. Like they're in the same room, but they're not really facing each other playing. They're just in the company of one another. And often we do that in the morning. And then we have conscious times that we come together throughout the day, touch base. How's your day? I'll come upstairs, check in, or you'll come in the office, come sit down and chat.
We'll often take walks in an effort to take a break from work. We don't necessarily schedule those.
It's been kind of the point, though. We're like, let's just interrupt the pattern of staring at our screen and let's get up and spontaneously go like for a walk.
Right. Well, and because we both work from home and we both are in control of our schedules, it makes it easier. Obviously, if you don't both work from home and you have, stricter schedules, if you don't work for yourself or if you have a 9 to 5, then scheduling can be very supportive there. But for us, we haven't found the need to have to do that, which is really great, and we're grateful for that. But I know you wanted to talk about the Enneagram, so this is a perfect opportunity to do
let's
so.
talk about it. Thank you. Yes.
Because a lot of what you spoke into there initially had to do around like needs.
Yes. Let's talk about
and
that.
individual specific needs and how we kind of dance and flow between like supporting each other and meeting our needs and communicating them at the same time. So the Enneagram has allowed us to bring an incredible amount of awareness, into the relationship around the other person's natural disposition. So every Enneagram type has a subtype, and my dominant subtype is social. So relationships for me are like oxygen. You and I were talking about this yesterday. So I get energized and I flourish within the context of connection and relationships. And so I need to proactively be making new connections, cultivating existing connections, maintaining existing connections, for me to feel passionate and feel alive and to thrive in many ways. Well, that is actually is lowest for Keri. It's actually in her what's referred to as your blind spot. So relationships aren't nearly as significant nor as important. They don't play nearly a significant role in her life as it does for me. And so her having awareness around that being such a significant high need for me, but such a significant low need for her, she doesn't make me wrong for that need. In fact, she's very proactive in supporting me in meeting that need, giving me the space that I need to meet that need. And for me, it's giving her the space and not projecting that need onto her as if she needs to also have that
expectation of me to have to.
Did it ever
match.
trigger you that was his need though?
Especially when, anxious attachment, you experience that as rejection. He doesn't want to spend every minute with me. Yeah. What do you mean?
Yeah, right, exactly.
And then I was like, oh, this isn't a rejection. This has nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
But I needed to heal that within myself before I could see it for what it was, right? Talking about trauma versus truth. When I was overhearing your episode earlier with Jake, it's, that's my trauma speaking out, experiencing this as rejection when in fact it has literally nothing to do with that at all.
Yeah.
The truth is it has nothing to do with me,
Yeah.
So, and it's important for a 7, he's an Enneagram 7, to have freedom and have autonomy. Because their fear is being trapped,
and the masculine,
and the masculine
too.
has to
like
choose
double freedom.
Yeah. So knowing that as well, intentional spaciousness, and an ability to be whole within myself, and be able to lean back and feel good about it. So that was a lot of the alchemizing I was doing in myself, but knowing and understanding, for him, those are things that he desires and needs to feel alive. of course I want that for him. So it's like, oh yeah, that feels really good to give.
Yeah. And then in classical Enneagram theory, every type branches or reaches across to another type when in stress or when in growth. And so this is the uniqueness of us being in partnership, because my type as a 7 reaches across to 1 in stress, which is Keri's predominant type. So I tend to become increasingly self-critical, self-judgmental, very black and white in my thinking, very rigid. However, in growth, Keri reaches over to my type. So she embraces fun, play, adventure.
Yeah.
She's much more open-minded in growth. And so because of that, and knowing that about each other, having that awareness, right? Everything starts with awareness. We're able to show up for one another in a way that really creates this beautiful unfolding within the relationship itself, where we're both able to meet our needs, communicate those needs, and support one another in that process.
Yeah, play comes natural to him. Like he's the enthusiast, so he knows that I seek permission within myself to play. It's not for lack of desire. It's like seeking that allowing of myself to let my hair down and do it. So he encourages that within me. And then when I know that he's in stress, I know that talk track all too well, and so I'm able to offer love and compassion and softness where he is maybe beating himself up or kind of playing something out, and I can hear that because I know that space.
Yeah, this really gives such a beautiful framework for people to like go back to and really understand themselves, but also in how they relate to each other. I have been aware of the Enneagram, but did not really realize how profound it could be for relating, and the true importance of that.
Yeah, because when you know how the person is wired, fundamentally speaking, and this isn't an excuse for that person to lean back into like, well, this is just who I am, or the way that I am. But when you know what naturally makes that person come alive, or what naturally causes that person to go into stress, you're able to support them that much more effectively. And you're also able to communicate your needs that much more effectively. Like I remember when, we first started dating, I, in many ways, was not aware of my needs. So how could I possibly communicate my needs if I wasn't in touch with them to begin with? And it wasn't until we started.
Both of us had to unpack that. Yeah.
Oh, wow. That can be overwhelming when somebody's like, how can I be there for you? And you're like, I don't even know what I need.
Yeah, you're like, I don't even know.
Yeah.
Because you haven't done the required work within yourself to identify like what is most important to me.
Yeah.
Not just as an individual, but within the context of how I exist and thrive in the context of a relationship. And for both of us, that's very different, right? You talked about, the masculine. The masculine's primary desire is to expand into freedom. And the feminine's primary desire is to expand into love. Well, in many instances, one could argue even in most instances, those two things are opposing, which is what preserves polarity, because freedom in so many cases involves a distancing or like a leaving to go do something else, whether it's to pursue one's career ambitions or further one's career pursuits, whether it's to hang out with the boys, whatever that looks like. And so there's a pulling away of the feminine, but that draws her to want to be with the masculine that much more. And so it preserves polarity. It preserves this healthy level of connection between those two. But I think it serves as a reminder that relationships, they're not designed to work, fundamentally speaking. They're not.
Can you say more about that?
Well, because how we approach problems, and I mean we as like the collective, we see problems as things that need fixing. None of what I'm talking about right now, the inherent conflict in relationship, that comes with cohabitating with someone else and navigating, meeting that person's needs, speaking your own, standing up for yourself, taking ownership and radical responsibility for what's yours, rejecting what is not, et cetera, et cetera. It's not a problem that needs solving nor fixing. It's just there for you to dance with.
Yeah.
And
That's
be
the
with and
hardest
hold,
part.
right? Because that's what shapes you, is when you be with it, when you hold it, when you dance with it, when we fix it, when we go into fixing, we often bypass the value and the lessons for us in the space of the tension. Of the tension, yeah. And so we miss the value in it because fixing is a way by which we, in many, many cases, we avoid. Rather than just be with it, hold it, dance with it, and eventually you're going to come out on the other side of it. That's when you experience, this alchemy, this transmutation or this transformation of being molded and shaped by your problems, as opposed to needing to fix or overcome them.
Yeah, the tension is really positive.
Right.
Well, when you think about a coach-client dynamic, for example, the best transformation is when the client is led to their own awareness. So if a coach is going into fixing or rescuing, it's really more about their discomfort with the big emotions and trying to alleviate their uncomfortability versus allowing the client to just fully complete that discharge cycle. And then come to hit their own bottom so that they can now start to rebuild and experience new awareness that now is all theirs.
Yeah, I think about how many times, and like the coach wanting to receive validation that like, I'm good at coaching because this person, I remember so many years ago how I was really codependent with my clients. I wanted them to need me.
Sure.
I was like, oh, this is playing out everywhere in my life. And it was overwhelming to confront. And it was a really difficult battle for me with my clients because I so deeply wanted their transformation, but could not do it for them. And was recognizing my desire to have them transform was actually very selfish because it was, I wanted it to validate that I was good enough.
And it comes from love, but the more loving thing there is actually being the holder of space without rescuing or fixing. And it's the same in partnership. The funny, ironic part about the paradox of freedom and love is that the more freedom I've given, the more he seeks closeness to me. So he has his friend in town and, hey, come with us to do this. And I'm like, you don't have to include me. He's like, no, I want you there. Oh, okay.
Oh, yes.
So
yes. Okay.
Right. Yeah. But I mean, it's such a paradox because, we think we have to go out and get love. Women nowadays, because I think that we have really been observing the masculine paradigm that we either need to be like men or be liked by men. And so really learning that we don't have to go out and grasp. It's in the openness and in the allowing that the love actually transmutes us and alchemizes and allows the masculine to come in and choose. And so love actually does not even, it doesn't leave because we are the ever abundant source of that. Once we realize we are the thing we're seeking, we have the magnetic power, right? And then thus freedom comes of that. There is no getting, grasping, controlling. It's just allowing. But now imagine back to 1.0 where I talked about he's seeking freedom and I'm experiencing his rejection, and that only triggers this anxious attachment. That's just got to be healed, or you are continually in the loop and in the, I was in the graspy and he was like, whoa, like, and again, we have words for this. There's many people that don't. They just know that there's some energy there that's repelling.
They're just existing within the context of this dynamic.
Right.
And then they both get to a point where like, you know what, this isn't working out.
Right.
Because they don't, like Keri said, they don't have the awareness of what is actually going on. And how their trauma or their woundedness is manifesting itself in the present moment in a way that's causing them to push love away or push connection away. And they chalk it up to whatever, Right.
not a right fit. Yeah, whatever.
right.
And it's
Well,
like you're really, it's just going to, in many times, it's going to likely recreate itself in the next.
Yeah.
correct.
So,
Because it has
Yeah.
to align with the current belief of love that you have.
yeah,
Right.
it's got to get
Unless
resolved.
you change, if you want a different result, you have to change your belief.
Right. Well, and until you heal it, you're bound to repeat it.
Yeah.
Totally.
So it's fun work. It's fun stuff.
Yeah.
Speaking about fun work and fun stuff,
Yeah.
you are on a podcast tour right now,
Yeah.
and you
Yeah.
two are doing it together, and you also do very complementary work. To start off, kind of segueing into a little bit different
Sure.
conversation, I was really curious about this the last couple of days being with you all.
Is this a secret question?
This was the secret
okay.
question.
This is the secret
This
question.
is the secret
Okay.
question.
Drum roll, please.
And it was,
Oh, she's got it on her phone.
I do have it on my phone because I worded it in a way that felt really like good. I was like, okay, how do you handle periods of imbalance when you're one of the partners, one of you, careers are like goals in that moment kind of precedes or needs more attention than the other? Like in some ways, like, I don't want to project my what I'm seeing for you, but right now you're launching a book. You really want to do this tour.
Yep.
One could argue, maybe, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there's a little bit more attention that's needed here,
Sure.
and you want to show up and support. How do you navigate that?
Yeah. Well, I'll use a practical example, a tangible example, because this actually came up a couple of weeks ago, where we're doing several in-person podcast episodes here in Vegas while we're here with yourself and other various friends. And Keri brought it up to me. She's like, "Why didn't you introduce me to so-and-so?" And I was like, I didn't even think about it. And my initial instinct was to be like, to get down on myself, to be like, man, I should have thought of that. Like, gosh, what was I thinking?
Really drop the ball here.
Yeah. And then, but like in my own self-introspection, like in that moment, I was like, you know what? Honestly, it's because I've been carrying so much. It's not that I wasn't thinking of you. I mean, yes, that was a byproduct.
Yeah.
But it's because I've been so overwhelmed with the launch of my book, with all that has come with and required and entailed.
Yeah.
I'm managing a business, running a business. Like, we have 2 kids that I help co-parent. We have a household. I was like, honestly, I've been overwhelmed with all of these different moving pieces and parts that are coming with this season of life, because it's a season. And I'm just going to need a little bit more understanding right now.
Yeah, I had to check myself because I'm like, it's not about me right now.
And
I'm the supporter, and that's I am used to being more in the spotlight, not more than you, I'm saying,
Right.
and there's no competition there, but just I'm not as used to being in the supporter role. And what a beautiful invitation for me, and I'm happy to do it. That's where I was like, my priority is to support him. My priority is to make this easier for him, and not make it about me right now.
And it allowed me to step into and practice communicating my needs, because once I like recognized and acknowledged that like, this is just a really stressful season right now because of everything that's coming with it. I'm really going to need your support right now. Like, I'm going to need a little bit more encouragement. I'm going to need a little bit more support, a little bit more compassion and understanding for you. Like, the bedroom's probably going to get a little bit messier for the next couple of weeks, like as a metaphor.
Yeah, sure.
And I'm going to need a little bit more patience and understanding with that. And she's been really great. Like, the minute we had that conversation, there wasn't
How can I help? What can I do to support
there
you
wasn't
in this
any
moment?
resistance, and it was a really beautiful interaction, because I kind of got emotional because of how much has come with this season, because my brain injury, like a little over a year ago, my threshold for stress and for dealing with stress is not the same. It's not. So my ability to metabolize and move through stress is not what it was. And so this book launch, as amazing as it has been incredibly overwhelming for me, because it has me juggling all these different parts and pieces that I'm not used to, along with my everyday life and my business. And so, that conscious conversation of being able to, step into the role of the observer and be neutral about the situation, about what was coming up for me and how she was approaching it, and vice versa, because this, in many ways, I realize I'm talking about a particular situation, but in many ways describes how we communicate in general, allowed us to dance with each other in this, where, like Keri said, she's not as used to playing the supporter role, opportunity for growth for her to step into that. I am not historically very good at communicating my needs. I'm very used to meeting my own and taking responsibility for meeting my own, because part of my woundedness is that I'm alone when it comes to meeting my needs. And so this is an opportunity for growth for me as well in being able to communicate that. And it's the dance, and we just continue and we go back and we go forth, and it's the dance. It's not meant to be solved or fixed.
Yeah. And I have a fairly high capacity to handle a lot at once. And there are things that he is extremely good at that don't come easy to me, and vice versa. So I've taken what comes easy to me in flow at a higher capacity for handling a lot at once. And, you know, his book launch funnel, got him set up to record the meditation in my office. Like, here's what we're going to do. I'm just going to set you up. You don't worry about the tech. I do this all the time for my meditation program. So it was like, you just sit down and you do your thing. 15 minutes later, we had a meditation. So it was like setting up all those things. I communicate. I have a Slack channel with his executive assistant, because there's things that I don't need him to get involved with, but like I need his assistant to handle. And I just go right to her because he doesn't need to be bothered with it. So there are things that I very easily can go through and compartmentalize and support him with. So there's probably even stuff behind the scenes he doesn't even know that I've done, but we had a whole agenda put together for this whole trip. You know, where we need to be when.
She showed me an itinerary the day before, and I'm like, what is this? And it was a whole like
4-page
designed
PDF.
I know. I asked you a question about something like, what's your schedule? She's like, well, we got this PDF.
Here it
And I was
is.
like, wow.
Yeah,
Yep,
I'm
here
really
it is.
great at
Yeah.
delegating. So, and I've got a good team of people, and I know what his assistant is capable of as well. And so I can handle it. Yeah,
I think
we
this
love
is
her.
really beautiful. It's sort of highlighting for me in some ways. Some people listening might think like, "Oh, you're stepping up and leading in your masculine by delegating for him."
Oh, no,
and
it doesn't feel that way.
regardless of masculine, feminine, it's like there's a harmonization happening.
Oh,
There's
totally.
going to be seasons where you might be more in your masculine, and he might need that, and vice versa.
Totally.
So it's really beautiful and very complementary of how you're showing up for each other, and really dissolving of like, you always need to be in your feminine. You always need to be. There's
Right.
so much pressure around that.
Yeah, it's very much
Yeah.
it's very much, again, just the dance
Yeah.
of going and being able to be nimble in that, right? Which looks like, okay, I'm going to step more into my feminine. Like Keri ran a retreat last November, and I was a co-facilitator for a part of a day. And so I'm very much playing this supporter, nurturer role, like, can I get you anything type of thing.
This is like so healing for me to hear.
It exists, ladies.
Yes.
Where
We believe it.
Right, where I'm operating more in my feminine.
Yeah, he's making it easier for me, right? Here's your, I'll bring the speaker. We have these meditation pillows. Where is that? You may run to the car. I'll get you. Do you need a snack? Did you eat something?
You know, and
very, even my assistant, you're getting my assistant stuff. So
oh, right,
sweet.
yeah, Robin. And so it's being able to do that and to practice it, because we're constantly brought back to the practice, whether we like it or not.
Yeah.
Because real life is constantly happening, where, you know, it's constantly presenting us with situations and circumstances that need to be dealt with.
Yeah.
You know, especially unexpected circumstances when you bring kids into the equation.
Well, I want to share how this shows up at home.
Sure.
Because
Please do.
if you, one thing, and I forget where we heard this, and maybe you brought it up, babe, I don't remember, but it was, you know, if you can ask yourself the question in every day, how can I serve him? And he's asking himself, how can I serve her better every day? He makes me a smoothie every morning and makes sure like I eat breakfast. And then I'll notice maybe at dinner, oh, he doesn't have a drink yet. Hey, can I get you some water? Is there something else you'd prefer? What drink can I get you? So I'm looking at how can I serve him, right? Oh, I know that he has something going on in the bedroom at whatever time because he has his office up there.
Yeah.
And so let me make the bed because I know that feels more peaceful to have, the environment be under order and all of those things. How can I make it easier? How can I serve you? How can I serve you better today? Every day.
Yeah.
And you do that. I feel you check in and ask. I don't know if you would consciously ask yourself that question, but you do a good job of checking in with me.
Oh, thanks.
Oh my God, you guys are so cute. I'm gonna cry. This is adorable. This is it's really, I think it's helping people like really see truly the work that's needed, but also the fruit of the labor that's on the other side, and that these relationships very well do exist.
Well, even when we broke up, I remember listening to a podcast Mark Groves had done about his breakup with Kylie, and they had a closing conversation. So we actually, in our breakup, had a closing conversation, which kind of was a whole thing, but we ended up, that's where I said what the healing I've been doing, we shared our experience of what we've been working on. And it was not a reconciliation or a conversation around like trying to get him back or him get me. It was just a, here's what I loved about, here's what I'm celebrating about our relationship. Here's what I wish you the best in. And here's where I would have asked for you to show up potentially differently and give each other feedback. Do you remember doing that?
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And then we also talked about what we had currently been healing. And I said, I realized this whole time, like I have been defining love as I need you to need me. And then that's when you were like, I wonder what I was like, I wonder what I've been defining love as. Love is I'm receiving it as you're trying to control me. That was after that conversation.
That was after the conversation.
Yeah.
But we had, so even in our breakup, we didn't do it traditionally. It was very loving. Love can look like not being together too, right? And that's how that looked in that season.
I could just keep going on this thread, but I know we only have a little bit of time left. But I want to stay with this, how the two of you kind of are working together as well. Well, I don't want to project what I see you guys doing, but it seems like you guys are like, you have very similar missions and things. So can you talk about how are you two, you talked about working individually and in relationship. How is your work kind of coming together? I think I'm not the biggest fan of Grant Cardone and Elena. I like them and some facets, but something that they often talk about is like having a family mission together. And so I'm curious, do the two of you have something that is a common goal for you related to your purpose? And how are you showing up in creating that now?
So, I mean, we did just establish an LLC.
It's official.
So,
Cat's out of the bag.
Yeah, well, I mean,
we have a knowing. It's just not fully landed quite yet.
I mean, a lot of, because ever since my brain injury, things were in many ways falling apart.
We had a major rearranging
for
last year.
For both of us. My business falling apart obviously impacted us as a household financially for a season, and it took a while to rebuild from there. Obviously, there was the health implications that took me. I mean, it took me over a year to recover. So, and this happened a year ago, February. So we're not talking that long ago here.
Not at all.
Where I was very much dealing with the physical and mental side effects of this brain injury that had a significant impact on my health, but also a significant impact on my business there, and therefore our livelihood.
Yeah.
And so the conversation around integrating our businesses, it wasn't a priority, to be honest with you. It wasn't a priority, to be honest with you, because my capacity to take on anything new was incredibly limited, because for a long time getting out of bed was an accomplishment. Just getting out of bed and not canceling any phone calls that day was an accomplishment. And so, we talk about like not trying to force timelines, like Keri mentioned. There is this internal knowing and peace that like that's going to happen eventually, but we don't feel any pressure, especially like, for example, with this book launch, where it's like that's kind of consuming this season, I would say, for both of us, because of how much she's supporting me in that, and we'll get there eventually. But I mean, behind the scenes, we support each other a lot. Like Keri mentioned, she's very incredibly adept when it comes to like graphic design work. something that is not my strong suit.
My brain works in visions, so I can brand something very quickly.
Right. And, you know, my background is in sales and marketing and business operations and construction. And so how to support her in that so that she can continue to scale her business and her impact in the way that she is with her new programs and various different offerings has been really pivotal for her as well. And so it's very complimentary, it's very supportive, but we're not there yet. And most of that, to be honest with you, has been health related. So
it's happening organically and has been for the past couple of months. We've been asked to do to speak as a couple unit here, obviously.
Yeah, right.
But also on the summit we were on recently, and actually just many other podcasts in general.
Yeah, we did
which has been happening
happening
organically.
Yeah.
Additionally, we've been approached by other people that are interested in doing couples immersions with us, whether they are single or they are in a couple. And we have a home out in California that lends itself for a really beautiful holistic healing facility. It's a cabin up in the mountains, but it also has, a biohacking facility, if you will. It has cold plunge pool, infrared sauna. So some healing modalities that you can physically, be immersive in. And then also between we are transformations coaches and spiritual mentors. So between that, it's just when we co-facilitate retreats, even we've been guests at each other's.
Yep. So she facilitated
really
one of my retreats a few years ago, and I supported her with one last year. But
maybe at the next one too.
Yeah, I still host VIP days up at the cabin. For clients, and so we've been approached by other people who are like, we want to do that like as a couple. Where we come in and do an immersive experience or so
now we've got the LLC and
it's naturally forming.
Yeah,
it's
here.
It's
right
much with no forcing.
Correct. Yeah, and so the pressure to like create an offer, just it's not there, and that feels good for now.
Yeah,
I don't know that it has to be a formal offer. It's
I'm
let's
using
talk
that as
to
an
the
example.
client and put together a custom package for them, their needs and where they're headed, and that's what feels we're ninjas at that anyway.
Yeah,
so.
I was saying that more as an example. It's
gonna do a master class.
Oh my god!
Just kidding.
If you do,
how about a webinar?
Please don't call it a master class.
We're gonna do a webinar.
Can we call it something else?
we can absolutely call it something else. Well, I mean,
that's an 18-day live event.
Right. Oh gosh.
An 18-day live event.
Just kidding.
Free. Yeah, oh my god, this sounds disastrous.
Opt out. Opt out. But it feels really good to, navigate. I would say all things, not just like this season in life, in this way where it's very much from a place of surrender and acceptance.
Yeah.
Of
we're open.
Having our hands open with an opportunity or for an opportunity to come in, but not feel the pressure, because honestly, we're both really satisfied in the work that we're doing right now individually in our businesses. Keri's somatic success program is going very well and growing very quickly, and the work that I do with men is unfolding more slowly, but naturally in a way that's very supportive for my health.
Yeah.
Because like I mentioned, my ability to show up and work in the way that I once did at the intensity and the frequency and the duration that I once did, it's not there anymore.
Right.
And so we're both very satisfied individually.
And I think that will remain true. Some level of autonomy and having our own individual separateness there, but also, and in many ways behind the scenes, we already are so integrated and have this dance and crossover, but now having it be more forward facing at some point.
Right.
And I think there'll be that dance, but I think all three will exist. There will be the us, and there will be the him, and there will be the me. And that feels good to me. I like having my autonomy in that, and I won't speak for you, but I imagine it feels good for you to have your thing too.
Yeah. No, I think a part of me will always feel that way, and I think a part of you will on some level as well.
Yeah.
Because it allows us to expand further into our own individuality and creativity in a way that constantly being in partnership with each other just doesn't lend itself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I also think women need exclusively female spaces for our own collective healing. And I think men more than ever need that as well.
Yeah.
And it for the collective healing, I think it has to be somewhat separate in other ways.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's something I really am sensing, and now having, you know, spent the last hour communicating with you, is there is a very strong sense of self and a very strong sense of unity together, which, you know, I think is very healthy, and also
Took a little bit of work.
takes work, you know, like also you really heard, you know, the audience, you're really hearing what it requires of you and what it invites you to show up for to create that.
Right. Well, and something that I'm keenly aware of, I won't speak for Keri, but something that I need structure, but I need to be able to break away from that structure.
Yeah.
I need the freedom to disconnect from it.
I actually seek the same, so that works.
Yeah, and so being able to have that autonomy within my own respective business of when and how I choose to do that is really healthy, I think.
Yeah.
Not just for myself, but for both of us. And so, yeah, we'll see what comes.
Wow. Well, thank you all so much for being here and really shedding light on creating and maintaining a conscious relationship while also creating a life that is really fulfilling for both of you and your purpose and what you're here to do in the world, and finding that balance with all of it and what it requires of you as an individual, and also what it asks you to show up for as a unit. So really appreciating your vulnerability and the work that you have done individually and together to shed light on that topic. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a wrap.
Beautiful.